Hello, thank you for joining this episode of the Melapress Show today. This is a recorded podcast, not a live one, because of all the traveling we're doing lately. So we are pre-recording some of these sessions. Today we're going to talk about WordPress security, but not the typical WordPress security, not the technical aspect of it, but more like how outsiders, enterprises, and other businesses perceive WordPress security. And to discuss this with me today, my guest today is Dan Knauss. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Great. Good to be on your show, Robert.
Thanks. Before we start, can you please introduce yourself and tell our guests, a bit about your history and your experience?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Dan Knauss. Most recently was a solution architect for a couple of years at Multidots, one of the VIP partners in the enterprise WordPress space. Currently looking at maybe joining a local agency, looking at some new things at this time. Before that, I worked on solid security under Liquid Web at Stellar WP, and have, through my own consultancy and other work, been in the WordPress space and open source for a long time, going back really before WordPress a little bit, but a lot of different open source systems, and security has always been either at the front or close side interest of mine.
Yes, you've also written in the past, right, about WordPress security, and
Yes.
correct. Good. Let's start. Because as you said, you've been also a senior security, not consultant. Sorry, senior security.
Solution architecture.
Sorry, senior solutions architecture. First of all, what does the job include exactly?
Well, that kind of covers a wide range. In actuality, it depends on the particular agency model you have, but it didn't feel too much different from when I was being a solo consultant and engaging with the sales process. And really, I think the ability to communicate well to any kind of audience, from a high level down to technical details or backup, and get between designer and developers on your internal team, and then whoever the client is. So there's always that initial consulting role where it's kind of the closer a lot of the times, or what clinches deals to build the confidence that, hey, here's how we could do this. Here's some early demos or proofs of concept, or going through discovery process, leading that often. And in bigger projects, working closely with the client team to figure out the requirements and put together a project, and then carry it through some bit of project management, delivery, and really the relationship that comes out of that. You want to end up in a long-term partnership. That trust is always what's built and needs to be sustained, and trust is a huge part of open source and really security. So those are very similar concepts and words that are always close. Whether security is part of the direct conversation or not, trust and the values around that in open source are really key to, I think, any client-facing role in a WordPress or tech organization, certainly agencies.
Interesting. In fact, today this is exactly what we're going to talk about. So security, trust, and similar stuff. So when you walk into a meeting, to a conversation with an enterprise, with a business about, and you mentioned, let's start with WordPress, because of course we know, especially WordPress reputation the last few years, different reports, and now especially with AI. What's the default reaction from the stakeholders about when you mention WordPress?
Well, they're usually already coming because they know about it and want it. Certainly by the time I would be dealing with clients, and long before that, I felt it has long sold itself. We might be moving into more disruptive, competitive times, a different changes happening in the market, but it's been a terrific brand. And people usually are, if they're bringing up the brand, we want WordPress. And in an enterprise context, that I saw that again and again. That's what brings them in. Sometimes in the long relationship with a bigger client and you're moving into dealing with other divisions in a company, there might be, you're often coming in with dealing with like marketing teams or things that WordPress is really suited for. You have great hosting partners around publishing and content, just teams that work inside a CMS a lot love and want WordPress. When you get into deeper technical integrations and things like that, it's a different group of people you're talking with, different priorities and concerns. So it would be less likely in my experience for, I think this is across the board. It doesn't matter if you're providing any number of platforms other than WordPress. It's not where the client is always thinking. And I think that's just sort of an industry cultural reality. There are not too many enterprises, even unless they're working in high security industry already, and even then some, or if they've had issues in the past, it's not first and foremost in their mind, and it should be. Everyone should be by now really prioritizing having a security culture.
Good. It's good to hear that, of course, kind of like people, like when you walk into these meetings, people already like want WordPress. But as you said, like when you start talking to the technical team, perceptions might change a bit and differ a bit. Like, what assumptions do usually technical teams have about WordPress, specifically about security?
I haven't run into an experience where that was really a major issue. It might be more on what their prejudices are around capabilities. If it's security, it would be more of a concern of, this is fine. This is sort of containerized outside of our infrastructure when we're using, something like WordPress VIP or Pantheon, or you're bringing in a major hosting partner that is only going to be integrated with existing deeper internal systems to the extent that that's part of what you're building. That's where that becomes a question. And often you're integrating with like a Microsoft IDP identity SSO experience, which actually gives them control over who's got access to WordPress and oversight for that. Or they may want to integrate with the SIEM, basically be able to plug something like an activity log into, keep an eye on what's going on inside the application. Haven't had a lot of people come at the enterprise level. It's very different than like smaller agencies and the WordPress kind of middle mass market where you hear all about plugin security all the time. That's really not the case in my experience at the enterprise level. It's a different world.
That's good to hear. So do you think like all these public reports, like headlines, WordPress secure, these type of narratives have some sort of impact in these conversations and in the way people look at WordPress?
I think so. They obviously must, but it does seem to stay in certain market segments. I think when you get stories that are generally quite unfair, misdirected at WordPress. There was something about a year ago may have been in the UK government or some paragovernmental site. I recall there was sort of a hubbub one week over someone had discovered that you can do a kind of directory traversal and pretty much everything in the media library, unless you take steps to lock that down, and you can find documents in there. And someone had some pre-press, some kind of news that wasn't quite yet to go out yet. Someone got into, and then people said, "Hey, this is WordPress. It's not secure." That's really outside the scope of what WordPress is supposed to protect. So that was not really a real issue. Often that's the case. A lot of vulnerabilities are sometimes misclassified or hyped up a bit, and the actual conditions to exploit them would be very minimal. But the security issues that when I was working with like Solid Security and security plugin ecosystem, that's oriented more towards a problem of all our huge third-party plugins, and that's we're not putting any old plugin or that many, or in an enterprise build, you have a contained system where everything that's going into it has been vetted and scoped, and either something we've built or anyway are maintaining. But that's definitely a point where I've always thought there's a lot more that some of the more robust and established plugin products could do more to work well with the enterprise space and extend their business that way. But they really are quite different worlds. There's and I think that's a good thing.
Good. You earlier mentioned that, yeah, there's a difference in the perception, like, because in the small business market, there's this whole idea of WordPress is insecure, etc. But you said in enterprise is a bit different. What is different exactly in enterprise from the small business size?
Well, I think at that level, the market has been won by solid hosting solutions and a solid brand and terrific agencies that do great work, and the facts are better understood. No, WordPress is very battle tested and hardened at scale. It's benefited from its age and openness. It's really that whole third-party plugin environment and lower market hosting that really bring, and just the giant footprint of, you're looking. If you look at enterprise WordPress, it's a pretty small but lucrative subpopulation out of, are we approaching like maybe 1 billion WordPress sites out there, domains? I think some years back, I kind of tracked it to about 850 million maybe. And yeah, I would say based on past back of the napkin math, there was always, you can always rely on 20-25% of those installs have probably gotten obsolete plugin or dependency somewhere in there, at least one. And so there is some exploitability there. And since you can do that at scale, even better now with AI tools, but it's always been a huge target.
Do you think that these type of reports or newsletters create more noise than clarity? Because, for example, I'm subscribed to some newsletters, and almost on a daily basis, some vendors send these newsletters like 200,000 websites vulnerable for this, or 200,000. Like, do you think these actually create more noise than actually some sort of clarity, or actually what is happening for real?
That's possible. Yeah, I think we probably do have to revise a bit the old Eric Raymond riff on Linus Torvalds, though. The more transparency is good, openness is good. The more eyes on bugs, potential issues, the better. But when it's a zillion different newsletters and websites, and you have people using it to kind of report in a yellow journalistic, hyped up way of, that's not helpful. And when I was producing, tracking and producing disclosures and being part of emails and things going out like that, you always want to think about, when it's your product too. People then suddenly become a lot more responsible about how they go about it. I actually recently went back to an old project I started then to kind of write a WordPress security style guide and how we should think about it, how we should write about it. And yeah, I think there's a good way to do it, and shotgunning the whole world with vulnerability messages is not helpful. I mean, that's true across the board. There's just been a exponential curve, just really high takeoff. It's never gone down from one year to the next on any platform. And if you follow industry security newsletters, it's mostly, Adobe or CrowdStrike takes down the airlines for a day. Like WordPress and its plugins are big in its world, but there's so much else going on security wise too. Contributing to the noise is not ideal, and across the board, I think everyone who wants solutions is looking for more actionable and focused information that you can use and maintain your own area of concern where you can actually act. Is this affecting me? What do I need to do? And the better hosts will generally take care of that for you. It sort of goes with the territory of being an agency to keep in front of those things.
Yeah, it almost feels like scaremongering, and scaremongering sells, no? I mean,
some definitely take it that way. Yeah, absolutely. And I think an uninformed perception might be to see the whole brand as insecure, but somehow in some way, but that's not so.
As an agency or professional or consultant, if they are approached by a customer, regardless of the size, and they have this concern, for example, because they just seen a report or newsletter, what are the best ways to handle such cases?
I think always, if people are open to being educated, that's a good thing to do, to try to break it down in simpler terms. And I think when people don't understand the system, then things are scarier, and you want to move away from the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and kind of scope things down. And what really can we, what is really affecting us, and is it what action can we take? And a lot of the time, you can simply point out, like, this isn't really a relevant concern to you, or it's easily addressed, or has already been handled proactively by a agency provider, vendors or hosts. The way, maybe sometimes explaining the way open source works, and how at least the better pros in the market do disclosures and get on top of security releases quite quickly. I didn't see anyone write about it, but we recently had a big batch of security releases that went out together. It's not too uncommon, but I believe a lot of AI assisted research has gone into finding more bugs. And when you find out about it, because it's often because this has been fixed, this is a good thing that's coming to light. So sometimes explaining that, there are very few 0-day situations that are going to affect a lot of people. Those are the rare and exceptional cases, and the rest is if you've been doing diligent updates on your own, and being selective with where you host, and how you manage your site, what you install on it, you're probably fine. I've personally had my hands on many hundreds of sites in the last 15 years. I think nothing I have been personally responsible for has had an issue since like the time of Tim Thumb, which I think is like where WordFence kind of got started, and a lot of other, where that kind of opened up the security space in WordPress, where there was a really, everyone was using this graphics library, and and that caused a lot of plugins and themes to be vulnerable.
Do you think the fact that WordPress is too accessible, and of course it attracts a lot of people who might not know what it takes to maintain a website, that could be also a problem? So people assume it's less secure because we are seeing these people making mistakes.
Yeah, that's I don't know what if that's the first thing in the consumer market. I think the bigger competitive risk now is other things, like what in the mass common user type of market, small businesses, they want to solve a business problem. They want to build something quickly. And I would say it's always been a problem that they don't think about security. And that's probably, true on a much higher level too, that you generally, outside of technical audiences, there hasn't been a lot of work done to kind of break down and explain what are the real risks and what are your responsibilities and how can you feel, okay, that's manageable. For me, it's like there's a ton of it has just become more and more just user management. Like who have you given access to things? Why? How long do they need it? Do they have appropriate privilege restriction? That more and more in WordPress and everywhere else has become a key issue with phishing getting really capable, with our OWASP top 10 number one issue. It's not WordPress specific, just broken access controls, ways that are being very targeted now because that's such a rich opening. It's not that there's so many vulnerabilities, but the ones that are there, if you get in through some broken plugin or in some other platform, some other source that gives you the ability to create a user account, escalate its privileges, or act with privileges that you shouldn't have, that sort of thing has really increased, and it makes sense that it would and will continue to do so. So that kind of comes down to like paying attention, like who's on your site, what kind of activity is being logged there, and are you even looking? The British Library, for example, that was there. Did you read that big postmortem? That was interesting. Maybe 2 years ago now.
Can you tell us a bit more? Because it does ring a bell, but I forgot.
There was a ransomware. There were a couple in Canada that were quite bad too, where major brands, get a really bad breach that ends up being ransomware. And the British, was it British Library, Museum? Anyway, it was they did a full public postmortem afterwards that was really interesting. But it boiled down to they had so many different systems and different vendors and no real governance. So they're not able to even fully pin it down, but it was highly likely that there was a rogue account or someone had gotten in through a user account that had been created for an external API or vendor, some access point had been opened up and left open and was compromised. And from there, someone was able to dig deeper into the system, compromise it enough to install ransomware, and really made a mess for about a month in a public way, kind of holding them hostage. And they were good enough to be very open about it. So those trends, when I was paying a bit more attention back then to that, I think you have the same with small WordPress sites. They're not the same kind of high level value target. You're probably not going to have, someone's blog struck with ransomware, but it will be exploited and used to support other attacks on elsewhere or for other purposes. And if that's coming in through your user accounts or a plugin that has kind of wonky, broken security permissioning for user access, then that's kind of on the people responsible for the site and should be visible to them. I think, we could do a lot more to educate about that. And it doesn't really matter what platform you're on. It's WordPress actually does give you the opportunity to see what's going on and control that, understand the surface. That's something I've never seen anyone really explain in plain terms to common user. What's an attack surface? What's the threat model? Breaking those kind of terms down and to really what's a manageable and simple approach to verify that, this is a pretty hard target and I know where to watch for mischief.
You are 100% right. I was at CloudFest just a few weeks ago. I've attended quite a few security talks and presentations, and even like there were the reports from PushSec, and like the two most common attacks are exploitation of vulnerabilities in plugins, outdated plugins, which is a human mistake because they should update them, And yeah, user account issues, basically, as you're saying, especially with phishing attack. There was this security guy who joked about it, like something like, because of AI, phishing has become much better than the actual legitimate emails. So it's really hard for people to recognize them. So yes,
Yeah.
so it's clear from all these messages, something that you mentioned, like some sort of visibility on what's happening on your website, what users are doing, what access they have. I mean, it all boils down to user mistakes. Quite frankly, all we're seeing is user mistakes.
Yes.
So
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to classify breaches, and yeah, if you look at the best industry comprehensive breach analysis, and what happened, how did it happen, how much did it cost, how big was the blast for this. Verizon and IBM both put out annual reports. I think there might be another one, but Verizon is the big one. And yeah, it's amazing how much that's just become the primary answer there is someone made a mistake. Someone screwed up is often the correct general explanation for what went wrong. But yeah, basic password security. The LastPass years back, right, was developers own unupdated operating system or home environment that compromised all of their platforms. So I think we can expect that more, but the messaging really hasn't shifted, and really hasn't so much in WordPress, that this is a user management and user access principle of least privilege and visibility on what your users are doing and how open your application is to other things accessing it.
yes, yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, you see some very complex technical vulnerabilities. However, in reality, most attacks, even some really big ones, usually are user mistakes. I remember a few years ago, I've been like 10 years ago or more, but yeah, you still see a lot of these. I was writing about this issue where the main servers, some people managed to get root access to the servers of apache.org. And when you trace it back, basically it was it was a phishing attack, because someone the attackers, it was a chain of vulnerabilities, but the attackers basically noticed that the apache.org foundation was using an outdated bug tracking system. They
Right.
posted something, hi, I need help with this bug, with a link, and their support people from the foundation clicked on it, and yeah, the rest is history, basically. And they managed to escalate their privileges up to root access on Apache.org. So yeah, so many people think like all these complex things, but yeah, a lot of even these big attacks are unfortunately user issues. So do you think, I mean, as we're seeing, like definitely there are a lot of user issues. Do you think WordPress is just maybe more harshly than other platforms when it comes to security, or mostly because of these things?
That it's harder to do security on WordPress, or
people think it's insecure, but the reality is, as we're seeing, it's more user issues. It's not WordPress per se.
yeah, and that cuts across all platforms, and that seems to be what's being targeted more and more. If someone gets into your own personal system through your phone, through something you've linked, or a insecure network you're on, and accesses your Slack through session theft, I mean, that seems to be more of the high risk, and then WordPress and other applications like that would come out of that. Oh, we've got a live session, we could hijack here, or just watching key logging or things like that are really just going to give them the keys to the kingdom. So yeah, I think educating people more about that is helpful. There are things that can definitely be done. The article we were talking about earlier, Joost de Valk's blogging about really kind of bringing together what a lot of people have said, kind of precipitated by the Cloudflare M- project. Well, it's a part of the thing with having a durable 20+ year platform it's not got the latest architecture or approaches to everything. It's well hardened and backward compatible, and there's a lot of backporting to ensure that we're covering security back in time, but there are some compelling things Yoast and others have pointed to about we're overdue for some refactoring and just kind of fundamental maintenance to cover in some of these areas where security is viable, but you can definitely reduce the footprint, reduce that target surface more, deny some opportunities. Plugins that have, for the big one for me, and I think what he identified as one of the heavier lifts would be just not having a system where plugins can have free reign of the file system, running with the same privileges as the application. And if we could scope that in a little bit more, fence that, gate it, that would certainly be helpful. But again, it would be primarily protecting core against what's coming in from plugins. I do like also just pushing more awareness and responsibility to plugin developers. We have a pretty streamlined process. I'm impressed, having gone through it recently with the plugin repo. For all its age and volunteer-driven nature, there are some good standards and criteria in place, and we could probably elevate those over time. There's, I think, more. The bar should be a little higher if we're seeing more code coming in from people who, like I've been going nuts with, using a lot of AI assisted development. If you can't verify under higher testing threshold, I had an interesting Claude conversation of, about test coverage some time ago. And it was like, oh, there's areas here you could improve, but this is way beyond what would normally be in a WordPress plugin. And how do you know? But yeah, there's definitely standards that could be raised. I think instead of talking about how vibe coding is, just this unhinged random code generation, as those models and tools improve, and as we're putting out skills and helping kind of pave the way for how this should be done, you can raise the bar on just ensuring that what's coming into the plugin repo has at least passed an ever increasing bar of requirements for its own testing, and security is one main big part of that.
Yeah, interesting. For those who are not familiar or not following, so basically what Dan mentioned, because we're exchanging some emails before, Cloudflare acquired and released AM Dash, which is like a new CMS, and one of their biggest features, it has a lot of features, but one of the biggest things that they're going to sandbox plugins, as opposed to WordPress, where you install a plugin that has access to the root, to everything in WordPress. Matt posted a post on his blog. I don't know the exact words that he used, but he said like, one of the fact that plugins can do literally everything on a WordPress installation is one of the main features. Yoast posted something about it as well, that kind of like WordPress should be a bit more respond to this, and maybe it's time to improve some things, basically. So yeah, what are your thoughts about the? I know you have a plugin, right, with sudo, which is quite a good idea. Like, what are your thoughts when it comes to these things and how it can be implemented or improved?
Well, historically, I kind of see it Matt's way, in that we probably wouldn't be here if, they're kind of agreeing in a way. Like Yoast talks about that architecture dates back to WordPress as a blog and a very simple architecture. So the growth wouldn't have happened if it wasn't open. We didn't have vibe coding then, but it was, there was a low threshold for people to learn how to build something, and single file plugin in there. And I think the question now is like, is there is there an inflection point where this has just become absolutely necessary and easy to do? If you're building a whole new application now, you're going to build it on the standards and norms and best practices of the day, and 6 months from now it will start to be obsolete, and in another couple of years all the same things will fall to you. So I think it's kind of both. Seeing things in kind of like a blamey way is not helpful. The web has been around long enough now that we need to think in terms of maintenance and care and responsibility to projects that are serious and have a community around them and have an ecosystem around them that wants to go on for a long time. Just because you can build something the way it should be now in one model, that is just far too short term in thinking. But how do we build for the long-term future, given the reality of where we are now, what we've got? Hendrik Larsen, I think, and Brian Koords both contributed similar thoughts. Yeah, there are things in the fundamental architecture of WordPress everyone's been working around and working with successfully and securely for a long time, but the trade-offs have performance hits sometimes, and definitely, the security issue would be mitigated significantly if plugins that are very accessible to create and use and operate across WordPress didn't quite have full reign of the system, and so those are good. Those are good questions to raise anyway. I think those are really important. Where can we put our priorities, and maybe the community can find some ways to rally around the value of maintenance and people who are focused on those things. They're not the hottest and most exciting issues you can market, but they're really, really important.
You worked with enterprises, but you were also for a few years the editor of Post Status, right? So you kind of like have a lot of experience, and you see WordPress from a number of different angles. Something like this, the AM dash, and all these hype and news around it. How do you think affects the way people look at WordPress? Is it or because by the way, I've been to WordCamp, I've been to CloudFest and to a few other conferences this year, and I get mixed feedback. Some people are saying, "Oh, it's the end of WordPress. WordPress has no place anymore," kind of thing. It's
right.
It's so weird. There are people on the other side who say like, "Oh, WordPress, maybe it's a good sign because with solutions like AM Dash, those like people who just use free websites, free plugins, etc., might go off, but WordPress will be used more and more towards like businesses. It's already used by businesses, but will become even more of a business enterprise solution." How do you think these type of changes we're seeing can impact, and how do you think people are businesses and other type of enterprises, etc., are looking at WordPress at the moment, and what do you think their perception is now because of all of what's happening?
I don't really have any more than just kind of gut intuition. I haven't followed it that closely, and I haven't gotten a lot of other outside WordPress takes on that. Maybe some developer friends who kind of worked in WordPress, but they're very agnostic in what they're working on, in and out of agencies, and they didn't even notice it right away. So I mean, they come back around to it, and that's interesting. And my conversation always goes to like, well, yeah, this is how we. they usually have their complaints about why isn't it this way, and like, well, here's the reason for that, and but then point them to things like Hendrik and Jost's writing recently. It's a community project, and those are things that are open to be addressed and dealt with. And I know people have definitely tried. Jost has talked about that, and maybe the time has come to find some ways forward, find some low-hanging fruit, make some progress on those items. I think it's a very inside baseball type of discussion, though. The M dash thing, I don't think that is likely to register too far out, I'll have to poll students at my meetup and, young people working on front end development and kind of in a learning position. I'm sure some of them have seen it, but I don't think it registers, launching on April 1st as, with no community really behind it. I would be kind of surprised if it coheres and gels into something people want to carry forward, especially with the kind of platform vendor lock-in that comes with it. But what it's generated is really awesome thinking together and really good questions and writing. I think that's going to have an impact, and it will be a question of a year or two from now. Did that change how WordPress as a whole, the ecosystem, community, major hosts and figures within it, did they learn from this, and did it change the course of history for WordPress? I think it should. I think it has to. It just sort of told us things we already knew, all in one concentrated way.
So do you think people in general are overreacting to these type of new releases and use, etc.?
You mean like just M-dash, like seeing that, oh, here's the latest WordPress killer? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. 'Cause I've seen stumbling the messages like, oh, yeah, M-dash is the next WordPress killer. By the way, there was also Shopify, Wix, and all the other ones. They were always supposed to be the next WordPress killer. So is it maybe people are overreacting to these type of? As you said, I'm sure it helps. I'm sure it helps, and it hopefully it creates it incentivizes discussions to improve things. But yeah, like in general, do you think people are reacting this? Oh, it's the end of WordPress.
I think it's always superficial reaction. I tend to ignore all of that stuff because you just can't predict things from single events like that. WordPress is so big and so established that the thing that I think serious people are worried about is just the slow death of 1,000 cuts, or your own foot guns, or your own lack of maintenance. And there's a lot to be said for keeping things simple and not reacting and not doing the right things. In being reactive and trying to be the latest and the best is not what wins the long race. So I think these deeper fundamental questions about how do you modernize architecture and what can you refactor and what are these deeper things, they go far below the hype, and there won't be, no one's going to, if you fixed all of these things, I think you could market the heck out of it and the people who matter would love it, but it's never going to translate into that kind of big, loud, splashy story of, hey, here's the newest, latest, greatest thing, or here's the thing that's going to destroy and torpedo us all. That's just not the serious level. And I think if you're talking about WordPress and systems like that, the big picture, the long-term approach is the one that's worth listening to. People who are thinking with experience and vision a long way down. That's a lot more worthwhile to pay attention to. And I think there are a lot of smaller people in the space, a lot of small businesses and smaller agencies that, it's what they do for a living, and they don't plan to change that. And they have for 10, 20 years. So they want a solid platform and reliability there and good hosting partners. And these are things we should not think of as like temporary buildings and crappy little strip malls that get torn down 10 years later, but we're building something more like a cathedral, or at least some people think of their businesses that way. And I think that's what we want to nurture and encourage. And it looks silly in the short term to have that kind of view, but it's a longer term payoff.
Yeah, that's a very good point, what you're mentioning. In fact, like I think Siad Balki, the owner of Awesome Motive, posted about this. Because like when you open LinkedIn, you think everyone is building the next best thing.
Yeah.
Everyone is just using AI like
Right.
crazy. However, from some research they've done, yeah, most people use AI just as a glorified Google, quite frankly, nothing more. But because you follow a small percentage of people who are leading the industry, we think that the whole industry is going that way. So people tend to panic. Could that be the case that people are panicking because they are following those
I
industry
think
leaders?
so.
So
I think that there is definitely that kind of tech bubble and the WordPress bubble, and I like to stay grounded from that by talking with younger people who are very new to the working on the web and with current technologies. And then I like to hit them with like, yeah, the voice of experience. Like, yeah, that's nice and flashy and all that, but that's going to cause all, as a business oriented solution, here's all the reasons why something more proven and established is easier to maintain, lower cost in the long run. And then other people who are like, I would put in the, small business, brick and mortar stores, people doing, who are showing up at the local farm market, and musicians heavily know and use WordPress, and know to some extent it's an open platform, and there is less, there are often people who don't like doing social media, do not like being trapped and hooked into noisy platforms that are just going to try to limit their ability to actually reach their customers and then raise the price tag on that. It's surprising to me at first when I started noticing that, how many people I know in music industry in Canada now that care about that stuff and see WordPress as set apart. Also true in independent journalism, things like that, where people really do value care. I think there's a new generation that needs that message kind of translated to them. Not just the creator economy. There's people of all ages doing things where they really want to have control over their platform and their own distribution and reach. And security and all the technical stuff is off to the side. They want it to be easy. But longevity is something that matters to them. They don't want to build something flashy and new that next year, they can't afford it, or it's changed something that, they just really dislike.
that's a good point, and it's also a good point that you mentioned. You like to talk to young people. It's a very valid point, because I notice it as well. Not young people, but you see a big difference in the way people look at WordPress. If you go to WordCamp, for example, to some WordCamp, not everyone, but the majority of WordCamp attendees are people who are involved in the WordPress community somehow. So of course they are following these news. However, if you speak to a systems engineer from a small bank or small local insurance somewhere, they know about WordPress because they use it, but they're not involved in the whole story of WordPress industry, where it's heading, who's doing what. Usually they don't have the same impression. They don't even know that there's, as you said, M-dash, or that there's this AI. I mean, they know about AI, but yeah, they're not using it as much as people who are involved in the industry. So yeah, so it could be that, yeah, we are kind of like overreacting. So, not everyone, but like some people in the community, just because they are listening to those few specific people, right? That could be the case.
I think so. If you just listen to people broadly, it's an incredible brand. There's nothing else quite like it. It's like Nike or something like that. I think this would be true even outside of like a startup tech incubator context, but that's where I've been most impressed with it, where I have our local WordPress meetup work alongside other meetups that have ties and use the space in a downtown thing. It used to be called Startup Edmonton, and now it's Edmonton Unlimited. And when we do like a mega meetup and all the meetups have a table, and it's basically just a big networking meet and greet, So you've got like the Python, Ruby, JavaScript meetup. You've got a Linux guy. You've got some hardware builders. You've got like a marketing or UX group. There's a bunch of different meetups, and most of them are quite technical and focused on a language or something like that. And everyone who comes to talk about WordPress, like no one is like, what's WordPress? And this is a very all ages, multicultural audience. Every possible person, like they know about WordPress, and the majority of them, they have I'm using it now. I've used it here. This is, there is an actual use case close to them. Oh, I've had issues. I have questions, or how do I get help with this thing? And then others are freelancing. There's so many different things going on with it. I think it both benefits and suffers a little from being like this multi-tool of broad appeal and usability, where that's such a diverse group of people. It's a hard mark. It would be a hard thing to market to, and the fact we really haven't. This is the result of that. It just became a ubiquitous tool. All these people have used it, are using it, and how do we keep that going? I think security is not on anyone on the tip of anyone's tongue, unless if they've been hacked or something like that. That's the term. My site got hacked or whatever. They usually learn in the process of going through something like that it was this plugin wasn't updated. I've done a variety of presentations on stuff like that, but it doesn't seem to land the way it does in the inside WordPress world that gets those newsletters every week. I don't think people are thinking of it in terms of security at all, and they should a little more in some ways, but really I think we should just be giving them a better product, and ideally some things like scoping the reach of plugins and their permissions is important. And yeah, there are a lot of messages I wish we got out that were more positive and more educational.
Is there something that agencies or people in the community, in the WordPress community, is there something that they can do to help slowly improve kind of like WordPress reputation, especially when it comes to security? Because yes, we're talking, it has this
I think it has a solid reputation, and barring some catastrophic event or just a really bad press event, even that just seems to never really land too far. Like, CrowdStrike, Microsoft, they can get away with all kinds of things. We haven't had, like a Tim Thumb since then, and that say lands on some major corporate clients. That's a scenario I would worry about potentially, and mitigate that. I'm sure everyone whose responsibility is tied to those things has that as a top concern. But just industry wide, I think there's been a shift in the last 5-ish years where bigger tech security conferences and analyst groups like Forrester and Gartner that hold them, their messaging has shifted to the onus is really on users and user management, and thinking less about the way everyone in WordPress kind of security plugin market is thinking. How do I keep it all out? How do I proactively defend? And thinking more of, yes, but many layers, but also for that point when things, if you're on the web a long time, you have complex systems, you have a big enough setup or a high enough target, high enough value target, plan for the worst. And that's part of your protection as well. And that's more of something that agencies of any size, I think, can work into their business in some ways. When your clients, they care about protecting their information, their assets, their brand, and their customers. That does increasingly come down to something where limiting the blast radius, diminishing the potential, how much harm can be done. If the worst happens, let's keep it within a small circle, and understand what to do next. That's sinking in more as at a high level anyway of what you need to do to protect yourself, make the worst scenario less bad, and to build a security-minded culture where everyone is, aware of the major threats to them in their role, which is emails and texts a lot of the time for regular folks. And I think that's just something we can push more if we chose to educate people about. This is a value add if you're selling your services. It's always a tough one. No one really wants to pay for security when they're thinking about a project or something else. This is added on, but I think we can do a better job given the world realities that this has only gone up as a risk and concern. People need to price that into what they're offering and work with a security solution, security partner. And yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of potential for doing that, with a focus on just better user management. A lot of the time, some of the tools we already use, teach your clients and end users. Someone's got to be on here managing not just content, but you're also governing user policies and who can do what.
Yes, unfortunately, security is a bit like an afterthought always. It's a bit like an insurance. Like with insurance, it's the same. Like, should I get this insurance if I'm traveling? Is it a safe country? Yes, no. And some people risk it, and then when it happens, if something bad happens, then they regret it. And it's the same. Like I can see it at Melapress because of our plugins, the nature of our plugins. But even before I was working with WordPress, I was working for security startups as well. We used to develop a web vulnerability scanner. And yeah, it's impressive how many people usually contact us after they've been hacked, not before, etc. It's always the same. And it's the same with our plugins. It's like, if you look at the activity log, it's always like, oh, we've been hacked, or we're an agency, this happened to our client website, and we want to know what happened. So it's always like an afterthought, which is a bit of a pity. So hopefully, as you're saying, I think educating people is very important. We've made, when we started years ago, the most common message was like, oh, you need this, otherwise you're going to get hacked, etc. However, with the last few years, we've been actively trying to be a bit more positive in our messages, and like, okay, you need this, okay, to keep accountability, etc., rather than saying, oh, because of you getting hacked, trying to be a bit more positive and send more of a positive message, because scaremongering might sell, but it's clearly not helping the reputation in general, and scaring people might actually push them away from trying to use something. So hopefully by educating a bit more people and using a bit more, not necessarily positive messages, but avoid the scaremongering. There are ways how to say things. You can say, your website is going to get hacked if you don't use this plugin, or you can say, listen, use this plugin, so you can actually see what's happening on your website, and then hopefully you can avoid some security issues. It's the same thing, but one of them is very positive. One of them is, I wouldn't say positive, it's neutral, and the other one is scaremongering, and so hopefully by educating the users, it will help a lot. Thanks a lot, Dan. Before we end this episode, is there anything that you'd like to mention, or we forgot to mention?
Oh yeah, well, I didn't really plan on promoting any of my own things, but I have been, as we were talking earlier, working on a number of interesting things to just learn more with what's possible with AI tools, and to scratch some old itches with things I have been curious about in WordPress. And if anyone wants to check out my GitHub account, it's GitHub DKNAUSS, and bunch of things in there I've done, but one we were talking about was probably generated the most interest, is pulling together a lot of things I've learned and overheard and talked about with really great security and developer minds over the years. And that's WP sudo, as in the Linux super user do. That is an early experiment. I'd love to have people's feedback on as a way to gate actions in WordPress, the more dangerous ones. So if you're going to do something, you need to re-authenticate, and this covers not just the admin interface, but all the other ways that a privileged access could run a delete command or change a setting and things like that. So it's kind of a learning thing for me, and I think just a lot of interesting thoughts come out of that. But that's one way to kind of mitigate the harm of potentially a compromised plugins, broken access controls, things like that, and to just get insight on who's doing what, because you can log all of those requests, and it works with two-factor and both of your activity log and two-factor plugins, since those were logical to test and connect with it. And other things too, I've got some documentation projects in there I finished up too that are all more and less enterprisey or security documentation, and a style guide for my kind of philosophy and approach, and format down to just how you write about code and glossary and things like that for anyone who wants to write about security in the WordPress space. And it really does start with how do we focus on the positives and empowering people, reducing uncertainty and fear, and doing responsible disclosure if you're talking about your own product and things like that.
Good, thanks a lot. We'll add a link to your GitHub and other projects you do, like the sudo plugin, in the show notes, definitely. But do you have like a website where people can find, like, do you have like a central place where people can find all your links, all your information, and maybe they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I have like a Linktree type thing on my Gravatar site, and there's a couple of domains point there. That's Dan. My last name, KNAUSS.ca, and that connects to all my stuff.
Good. We're going to link that as well in the show notes. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for it. Was nice speaking to you. Definitely very informative, and hopefully, we'll within a few years, WordPress will have a much better, or people will have a much better impression of WordPress. Thanks.
I think so. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Thanks.